Today, we are diving deep into a massive constitutional clash that went all the way to the Supreme Court. We're talking about the unprecedented attempts to impeach Vice President Sara Duterte. Let's get right into it. I mean, just think about that question for a second. Can you really hit the second highest official in the country with 4 separate impeachment complaints in such a short time? Well, that's the wild scenario that sparked a political firestorm and a landmark legal battle that the Supreme Court had to settle. And here's just how fast everything went down. Look at this timeline. You've got 3 different complaints filed in December 2024 alone. But it was that 4th one, the one that dropped on February 5th, 2025, that really kicked things into high gear and pushed the whole situation into a full-blown constitutional crisis. All right, so to really get our heads around this whole thing, here's our game plan. We'll start with that initial flurry of complaints. Then we'll look at the specific constitutional rule that's at the heart of this whole debate. After that, we'll break down the arguments from both sides, get into the Supreme Court's final word, and finally, talk about what it all means going forward. So let's start at the beginning with the political storm itself. And you have to understand, this wasn't just one shot. Oh no. This was a sustained, coordinated effort coming from multiple different groups, all aimed at removing the vice president from office. The first wave came crashing down in December 2024. You had 3 completely separate complaints. They were filed by a real mix of people: civil society leaders, activist groups like Bagong Alianseng Makabayan, and even religious figures. All 3 of these landed in the House of Representatives, just kind of sitting there, waiting for the committees to act. But then, this is where it gets really interesting. A 4th complaint was filed, but this time it was different. It was directly backed by a full 1/3 of the members of the House. And what that did was it let them bypass the whole committee process and send the articles of impeachment straight to the Senate. That move basically set the stage for an immediate trial, and more importantly, for a huge legal challenge. And that brings us to the legal core of this whole mess. It all boils down to a very specific clause in the Philippine Constitution, one that was written to prevent exactly this kind of situation. Okay, so before we go any further, just a super quick refresher on what impeachment actually is. It's not the act of removing someone from office. Think of it more like a formal accusation, kind of like an indictment. The actual trial and the potential removal from office, that all happens later, in the Senate. And here it is. This is the line in the sand. This single sentence from the Constitution, what they call the 1-year bar rule, is what the entire case of Sara Duterte versus the House of Representatives was all about. It seems pretty straightforward, right? But believe me, how you interpret it, well, that meant everything. And the entire debate came down to the meaning of a single word: initiated. It's kind of crazy to think about. Does initiated mean the moment that very first complaint was filed back in December, or does that 1-year clock only start ticking when the House officially sends the case over to the Senate in February? The answer to that question would decide the whole thing. So, the stage was set for a major constitutional showdown. Both sides geared up and took their arguments to the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court. So on one side, you had Vice President Duterte's legal team. Their argument was pretty simple. The process was initiated the second that first complaint was filed in December. That means the 4th complaint was a clear violation of the 1-year ban. Simple. But on the other side, the House of Representatives fired back, saying this was a political question. They were basically arguing that impeachment is purely a political process, and the courts have absolutely no business interfering with their power. So after hearing all the arguments, all eyes turned to the Supreme Court. They were the ones who had to step in and deliver the final, definitive word on this incredibly high-stakes question. And wow, the ruling was decisive. The court declared that the 4th impeachment complaint, and by extension, the articles of impeachment sent to the Senate, were unconstitutional, null, and void. Just gone. It was a massive victory for the vice president's camp. So why did the court jump in? Well, they completely shot down that political question argument from the House. The justices basically said, look, when the constitutional limits of a branch of government are being tested, the court doesn't just have the option to step in, it has a duty to. They even called it a matter of transcendental importance for the entire country. Let's break down the court's logic step by step. First, they said, yes, we have jurisdiction here. Second, they settled that big debate over the word initiated. They ruled the clock started ticking with the filing of the very first complaint. Third, That means the fourth complaint was, without a doubt, filed illegally inside that one-year ban. And, finally, because the complaint itself was invalid, the Senate had no legal power to even hold an impeachment trial in the first place. So the court has spoken. Case closed, right? Well, not exactly. This ruling was huge, a landmark decision for sure, but it didn't just end the story there. So what were the real-world consequences? What happens now? And this is a super important point the court made sure to emphasize. They clarified that the ruling was purely about the process. It had nothing to do with whether the vice president was actually innocent or guilty of the things she was accused of. All they said was that the way the House went about it was unconstitutional. The door is still very much open for another impeachment down the line, as long as it's done correctly. And the court was very, very specific. They literally put a date on the calendar. Since that one-year clock started with the first complaint on December 2nd, 2024, no new impeachment proceedings can be initiated against Vice President Duterte until December 2nd, 2025, at the absolute earliest. That one-year protection is now set in stone. So when you step back from all the legal drama, what are we left with? This whole saga leaves us with a really profound question about the balance of power. What we saw was a direct clash between the political power of Congress and the constitutional authority of the Supreme Court. And in the end, this case became a powerful reminder of the judiciary's role as the final referee, shaping the delicate balance of power that holds the republic together.